they are on their own. But you have to notice something, that these sectors working in silos was not delivering the much needed outcomes that we are talking about. So the approach was then changed to programs. The program combines the different agencies of government, private sector, development partners, everyone working towards a common goal. So the program-based approach to planning and resource allocation then starts in NDP3. The present financial year we are in, which is ending in a couple of weeks, is the first budget under the NDP3. Unfortunately, even while the NDP3 was in place, the current budget was not under that planning framework of programs because it was a transition period. This coming financial year is one that is strictly using program-based approaches to planning. We have 18 programs in the NDP3, and those programs are the basis for resource allocation. So we no longer have sectors operating in a silo or in their own corner. We have everyone coming together to a common good. The best example I can give of that is human capital development, which is bringing education, health, water supply, access to safe and clean water, because all these things contribute towards your development, the development of your human capital.
Okay, very important. How about our priorities? Have we set right our priorities? Because I think this is one of the things that people have continued to castigate the government, is saying, yes, we have all these priorities, but I do not think we set right our priorities. Talk about the budget priorities.
I think the best way to illustrate a priority is where your money is. Where you put your money determines how much you value that particular area. And so when you look at our budget, the biggest proportion of the money is going into human capital development.
Okay.
It is accounting for about 26% of the budget, which in essence is a very good thing, because while the times we are in require us to strike a balance between looking at the welfare of the people and the development of the economy. And human capital development is at the center of both, because it is people that make up markets. It is people that make up demand. It is people that will consume and produce. So all those things are essential, and human capital development is at the center of the needs we have, not only as a country, but globally. Because people have to come out of this health challenge that we are in as a country and the world over, and then be able to go back to being productive so that the economies can grow. The top 4 priorities in the budget are human capital development, followed by integrated infrastructure, transport and infrastructure development, then followed by governance and security, and then followed by agro-industrialization. And when you look at those 4 combined, that is where the biggest needs are for us as a country. When you go into the nitty-gritties of those budgets, the details, there is still room for improvement, because we've been talking about improving recurrent budgets beyond salaries, so that the people who we are employing are equipped with the necessary tools and resources to be able to deliver. So in there is where the priorities perhaps need some room for improvement. But in terms of where the monies are in programs, I think for this budget, we've got them right.
Okay. Ndugu Magara, I know you have a bias on extractives from that particular one. And just looking at this budget and, of course, where we are now, I want to hear your mind on extractive specifically. Then we also talk about the efficiency of the budget, because whenever we talk about budget issues, we tend to conclude that yes, it's a pro-people budget, but at the end of the day, at the end of the financial year, then we again get into postmortem of what did not work right and what we did not really try to achieve. Let me pick your mind on that.
Thank you so much. I wanted allow me to make a small rejoinder to what Keith was discussing on program-based budgeting. One of the complexities that the sector budget was actually facing is really getting out the linkages. I give you a very small illustrative example of sanitation in schools. Who is responsible for sanitation in schools? You'd go there, Ministry of Education is not taking full responsibility. They will say that is the Ministry of Health, because they know there is sanitation under health. Then they will say sanitation issues are also issues of Ministry of Water and Environment. And they keep playing around, and you find that we have very poor sanitation in schools, and there is nobody to blame. When you go to Ministry of Education, they say, no, but that's Ministry of Health. When you go to Ministry of Health, they say, but that's the Ministry of Water. And you keep in silos. And we think that now that there is program-based budgeting, it is going to solve some of those complexities that were coming with implementation of the budget. Coming to the extractives. Aware that Uganda's oil and gas sector is actually taking shape, having concluded the major agreements. We think that us who are in the sector, we are praying that this sector comes on board as early as possible, because you know that even linking to the public debt, the biggest percentage of our public debt is actually going to the oil and gas sector. So before it generates money, then we are likely to see a very big burden on the taxpayers to pay the money which is going to the sector, and yet the sector has not started bringing in money. We are aware that in this budget, I think they are going to get around 200 billion from the petroleum fund. But of course, that's peanut compared to how much is being sunk in the budget. One key area where we would be getting a very serious potential is actually the minerals. Aware that I think last 2020, 2021, minerals I think contributed around 2.3% to the GDP, which is a very good thing, rising from actually literally 1%. But you know, the minerals have the potential of contributing around 10% to the GDP. But because of the weaknesses that we still have in the sector, we are not able to mobilize enough resources that would actually support the budget. First of all, we are getting very limited taxes from our minerals. Gold, for example, where we are getting a good substantial amount of gold getting out of this country. You're aware that royalties, the last time I checked for 2019-2020, we got royalties of only around 17 billion. Actually, the total revenue from minerals was around 17 billion, and royalty was around 12 billion, the non-tax revenue. So that means that's very, very little money compared to what we'd be getting. And what is the problem? The problem is that we don't have machinery to track whatever mineral is gotten out of Uganda. We cannot able to trace the production volumes. And these miners, they will always declare they under-declare so that they can have very limited tax liability. And the essence, they contribute less to the treasury. And that's why with the coming in of the new mining bill, which was passed by cabinet last time, if it is expedited very fast, and some of the measures to maybe improve how we can monitor the production, improve how we can collect taxes from the miners, will also improve the revenues that we generate from the sector. So if we can improve revenue generation in the mining minerals, and then we also improve the taxes from the oil and gas, I'm sure it would contribute so much on the reduction of these exorbitant taxes, the deadweight taxes that we experience. Uganda, you're aware of how the smaller taxpayers are facing it rough. Because in Uganda, it has come out to be like, because you are compliant and you are a formal person, you are the one paying tax, every tax comes and hits you and hits you. And in the end, most of these taxes become a burden to most of our people, and they drop out. You know how the real estate is experiencing issues about the capital gains tax, about the VAT, about all of these. You find that because it is a formal sector that can easily be targeted, all the taxes will be heaped in one area, and the rest of the people are not paying taxes. So that way, we are, one, narrowing the tax base, at the same time, hitting a smaller section of the people hard that they are unable to proceed, and they end up falling off from business or something. And that's what we call deadweight tax. Because the moment the tax kills business, that's not good tax, because it affects the economy, it affects employment, it affects everything. So basically, one thing that we need to know is that we need to improve our revenue base targeted for 2021, 2022 is close to 22 trillion, around 22.4 trillion. That's little money. That's around 50% of the budget. 50% of the budget. So if 50% is going to be borrowed, then it tells you how much burden we have. So it is very important that as we move along, we find, and by the way, that 22, we are also not sure that we are going to raise the 22, considering the situation now. We are now in a lockdown. So the target of 22 may come down by 4 or 5 trillion, and we have 17. So that means before we realize, we are going to see more borrowing to fill the what? To fill the gaps. So it is very important that now that we are already not sure of how much money we can realize, we should be able to be frugal enough, and we cut the size of we cut the cloth according to its size. First of all, we need to stamp out inefficient expenditures. I'm happy during the budget speech, the Mr. President talked about what we activists have been talking about, budget corruption. There is a lot of inefficiencies that we have in the budget, because you see the allocations on the face value, but when you open what is going where, that's where we get challenges. You find that before we got COVID to save us, we used to have a big chunk of that money you see in the budget on things like foreign travels, on things like meals, on things that are not going to benefit the local person. And one thing that budget corruption has shown me is that people have a racket of trying to put money in the budget, and they end up not using it for what they have put it for, but they use it for something different.
Misappropriation.
Misappropriation. And there is no way you can detect it because it has been put in the budget. Sometime back, I know it may bring controversy here. You would be analyzing the budget. You see someone is putting an activity to do in Amuru district. But among the things he is appropriating downward, he's saying travel abroad. Then we asked, here you are going to be in Amuru, but among the things you are going to spend on is travel abroad. What is this travel abroad for?
That's not indicated in here.
Yes, because the activity is in Gulu or Amuru, but one of the things you are going to pay workers, you are going to do this, but among the things you are going to spend on, you are going to travel abroad and 500 million. So that money is money which is going to be stolen. And members of parliament were not even saying that. So the moment some of those loopholes are not really fixed, then you will see a lot of money, yes, put in the budget, but it is not going to do exactly what it is supposed to do. It is actually going to be siphoned out and taken. I'm glad the president has already opened up his eyes towards that kind of budget efficiency, and that's very critical, because we know it can be a small money, it can be small money, but it can be utilized very, very well.
Okay.
Yes.
Keith, budget efficiency. How efficient is a budget?
I think I will start by defining what efficiency is. Simply put, for the common man, is value for money. It is getting the most you can out of every unit of currency or of expenditure. So for every shilling that we are spending, ensuring that we get the most out of it. That's budget efficiency. That's efficiency that cuts across in all expenditure. Even if it is in your home, you ought to ensure that you're getting the most out of every shilling that you're spending. So the question then comes now to the budget. Are we seeing value for money? Are we seeing the most we can from every shilling that we are spending? And I think that is where the level of improvement has to be, because it's not enough to allocate money to the right places. It's also very important that that money is spent on the intended purposes, that it is spent on getting value out of this. And you have to give credit where it is due, because we've seen a lot of measures put in place to improve this. While we acknowledge those measures and give credit to government for those measures taken, several of them over the years, there is still room for improvement. And one of those key issues is on project implementation. When you see the Auditor General reporting on loans that we've acquired, they are accruing interest, but the projects have not yet started being implemented. There is a challenge there, because you are accruing interest without getting value from the money that you have borrowed. So that's a big area of improvement for us as a country. I recall one of the World Bank's economic outlooks of the past, I think 2-3 years ago, was looking at project implementation, and I think the conclusion was that for every dollar of the money spent on projects, I think we're only getting back like 0.4 of those dollars in terms of returns.
0.7.
I think 0.7? Yeah, 0.6 something, close, if you round off to 0.7. So, which means that we are making losses on every money we are putting in place. You have to also reconcile that with the fact that some of this expenditure is long term. So it accounts for some of the losses that are coming in what we are talking about. The returns will come in the long run. When you build a road, the developments that come as a result of that road are not usually instant. They come in the long run. But things like delayed project implementation, things, early areas of great improvement that we have as a country, so that we can maximize the money that we are spending. The other area, of course, of improvement is in the allocative efficiency of the budget. That's where we're talking about the priorities that are within these sectors. Because if you look at a sector like agro-industrialization, for instance, when you look at the priorities that we have put money on, most of the money is going into supply of inputs. But we have very few extension workers to be able to help people with knowledge to get the most out of these inputs that are being supplied. The extension workers themselves are not well equipped to be able to move around. So farmers have to pay for the extension worker to get to them. And those are areas where allocative efficiency becomes important for us as a country. So there are still areas of improvement in terms of allocative efficiency and project implementation. The gains that we have made in terms of the strategies Ministry of Finance has been putting in place, we've got to build on those to make sure that we get the most out of every single shilling that we are spending. When you look at education right now, we have schools that are closing shop, private schools especially, because they don't have any money. COVID-19 has hurt them significantly. How are we as a country helping these to stay afloat? Because these schools are key consumers of agricultural produce. that is beans, maize, you know,
Cassava,
they are
potatoes and
cassava,
all
potatoes. They are key employers of people, teachers. So when you look at the value they bring to the economy, it is worth helping them, putting in place a fund that can help them stay afloat so that they can access credit at a minimal interest rate, because the banks are still lending at very high rates. And that's the final area perhaps to talk about in terms of efficiency. The strategies we are putting in place to help the economy regenerate and grow back to the levels, because now we are projecting to grow, I think, at 3.5%. Yet that's half of what we had projected at the start of the NDP3 project, period. So we have to put in place strategies of that nature that help small, medium-sized enterprises to stay afloat in these difficult times, and so that the economy can be given a jump start, a restart in certain sectors, so that we can fully open the economy. We have not fully opened, because if businesses are still operating up to 7 p.m., when previously they were operating up to maybe midnight, there are challenges there, because all the revenue or income they were making in those times has not been compensated for. So we have to move towards a state where we can open up the economy responsibly, of course, because COVID-19 is still here with us, so that the economy can get back to the levels it was before.
Okay. He talked about something which I want you to pick it up from here, and that now takes us to budget financing itself, because I think it's also very important that when we talk about all these issues, and so it's a good thing to say, we have a budget of 44 trillion Uganda shillings. Next year we'll have a budget of maybe even 50 trillion. So every other year the budgets keep growing, but financing the budget is the biggest issue here. When you talk about 22 trillion shillings that can be collected here, and look at the challenges that we have. Now we have COVID, we have the night economy is actually out of business, and quite a number of things that are happening to us. And so we can only be able to finance up to about 50% of our budget. And now that means we'll let the 50% be somewhere, and yet we also have a problem of fighting with the big and enormous public debt that we're also trying to finance here and there. So when it comes to financing the budget and its realities and the priorities, how sure are we that we will actually make headway?
We will make headway. Of course, one thing that perhaps viewers need to understand is along the way we have what we call supplementary budgets. And what that happens is that the budget is not going to increase beyond 44.7 trillion. Even
with the supplementaries?
So what supplementaries means is that if you have your resource envelope that is already approved, without additional resources, it means you're going to cut from someone. So you cut from perhaps health and put in education. Because if you don't have additional resources, you can't stretch beyond your limits. So there will be, within, the law allows for what they call virements within votes. You can work around with the money you have to put on the urgent priorities that you have. And that's one strategy that is often used. Sometimes supplementary budgets, of course, have caused a lot of controversy because they have not been well utilized. We can't run away from that. So that's an area of improvement. In terms of revenue generation, which is the question you are asking of whether we shall be able to make it. One of the key things that we need to do as a country is to minimize domestic borrowing.
Domestic borrowing?
Yes, borrowing from within the country, because that debt is very expensive. You had a very packed question, so let me try and unpack it, starting with the debt. Our debt it remains sustainable. What do I mean by that? Debt sustainability is your ability to pay off your debts. Are we able to pay off our debts? Yes, Why?
We are.
Yes, we are. Why is that? Because of the structure of our debts. The debt is expected to rise maybe to 52% of GDP by the end of the next financial year. But thereafter, it is expected to start going down. Why is this? Because we are borrowing. In economics, they call it front loading. We are starting with heavy expenditure, and that is things like roads, bridges, the oil pipeline, the railway. Those are things that are needed now, but we don't have the resources for them right now. And the longer we take without them, the more they affect the economy. So what we have done as a country is we've opted to borrow in the short term heavily so that we can put those things in place, and then we can start to reap the gains of those things being in place. So most of the debt that we are accruing, about 3/4 of it, 75% of it is external debt. And that debt is on what they call concessional terms. It is debt that is long term, a minimum of 5 years repayment periods. Minimum, most of it is over 10 years. The interest rates are very low. I keep giving the example of the recent credit facility from the IMF, about 400 million USD at 0 interest rates. That is the kind of concessional terms we are talking about. You cannot get those terms domestically. Why? Because Jagenda has his kamane. He wants to buy a bond, a security bond, or a treasury bill. He's looking at it as an investment. Jagenda, as an individual, does not have the capacity to say, I'm going to invest in this for 10 years. So when you sell treasury bills and bonds on the market, their maturity periods are much faster than the external loans that we are getting.
3-6 months, 1 year?
Exactly. So they mature very fast. And the challenge is when they mature, as a country, you need to have the money to pay, or you're going to default. That's why you see sometimes we have to get money from elsewhere to pay off this maturing debt. And that's one of the strategies that you keep hearing in the budgets, that will minimize domestic borrowing. Unfortunately, along the way, we end up again borrowing
domestically.
And the other challenge that has had is that it has limited the creditworthiness of the private sector. Why? Because the commercial banks would rather lend to government. Government is a sure deal. Government always pays. Even if the regime changes, you will be paid. So the banks, one of the reasons you see that the Bank of Uganda's rate, the BOU rate, has not had so much effect on the lending rates that's one of the reasons. The other thing that we need to look at in terms of financing is the revenue mobilization domestically. Because the more of our own resources we are able to raise, the better. So the question is, shall we be able to raise the 22 trillion? And key to that is ensuring that the economy grows much faster than it is growing right now. There is a lot of uncertainty right now, not only in business, but generally within the country, arising from COVID-19. There is a lockdown hanging over our heads given what is happening. We're already in a partial lockdown of sorts. So the faster we arrest the COVID-19 situation, the better it will be for the economy. Because we can't go back to operating normally when we still have the pandemic in our midst. So it is crucial to our economy that we arrest this situation. That's why it is essential to the public, because this disease is one that relies heavily on personal hygiene and personal initiative. So wear your mask, sanitize, discipline. Keep your distance, because the resources required to vaccinate the entire nation are very, very high, and perhaps we don't have those. So as an economy, beyond what government is doing, personal initiative is very
personal
important. That personal responsibility.
It is very important.
Yeah.
Ndogo Magara, our revenue generation strategies viable, and also the discussion on the increasing the tax base has been one of the things that people talk about, and you hear people talk about Sentezomu solo. Now, Uganda feels, because I travel in a taxi from one place to another, we go to a petrol station, fuel and all the things. There are those indirect taxes that I pay, so I qualify as Omu solo or Mutuawansi. And we now want to talk about our generation strategies and even strategies to increase on our tax base, which I think is also very important. How about that?
Mr. Jagend, I think right now COVID has really made us to be in a catch-22 situation. This is a struck economy that is really struggling. Yesterday, I was moving around the street and people are now selling chicken at 12,000. A chicken which has been around 30, now it has, in just 4 or 5 days, has gone as low as 12,000. It means that the economy has a lot of challenges, and COVID is not a joke when it comes to arm twisting the economic fortunes. But at the same time, the people who are struck with these misfortunes of COVID, they are the ones supposed to pay the tax. And this tax is supposed to finance the budget. And I find it a little bit challenging on the side of administrators who have to get money from us, and the people who are already sick financially and cannot be able to pay. What is very important is that government needs to be considerate. Because the moment someone is sick, then you come and hammer him, he will go down. So if someone is really struggling because of COVID, then you slap him with the very heavy taxes, then he goes down. It's true that we needed the 22 trillion, but I'm sure we should be able to really re-examine the situation and be able to be considerate in terms of knowing, can we be able to get all this? Can we be able to squeeze the 22 trillion that we are looking for to finance the budget? He talks of now thinking, if we cannot be able to raise it, then government has to come with a very good policy of saying, okay, we are not, because of the COVID misfortunes that have turned around, the 22 is not realistic, maybe 18 is realistic or 19 is realistic. Then how do we fill the gap? And the gap should not be again to borrow from internal. I also want to make a rejoinder that internal borrowing is very dangerous to us, the natives, because it crowds out the private sector. The money we would borrow from the bank is already borrowed by government, which is very trusted than us. And therefore, when we go, they are not interested in lending to us. The banks are not
They have a more credible...
Yeah, they have a more credible customer than us. And in the end, we end up losing out. Putting in mind that we are looking for capital to keep afloat in our businesses. And this capital is not there because banks even fear the uncertainty that COVID has brought. Then it is going to worsen the situation. So this is an emergency case, which I think policymakers also need to find a way of twisting it in terms of how to mobilize revenues that will finance the budget and how to keep the economy moving, because the economy has to move. The moment it gets clogged and it comes to a standstill, it can even become a very dangerous situation. So it is very important that we need to see ministers, policymakers coming up to think of how they can find an amicable solution in the short run to make sure that we do not really clog the system. Secondly, it is important that last time when COVID hit us, we readjusted. We can also readjust.
Now.
Yes, now. We can readjust the priorities. The first thing is, if, for example, people are getting too much allowances, because now the situation is not normal. You are getting an allowance from this person who is really struggling. This one, you are sucking blood from someone for you to get hefty allowances. Can we also see maybe allowances cut by 50%? So that there is...
You may not get there.
I may not get to salaries.
But the allowances.
But the allowances.
Those allowances.
Yeah, because you are sure that, yes, I can get some salary, then it's 50% of the allowance. And this person whom I'm milking, I'm able to at least make him survive. But if you get the 100%, he's going to collapse. Even the money you are getting, you will not get anything.
Exactly.
And that one, it may bring an economy to a standstill. So that's why we say that we need to see also those frugal measures coming up, like minimizing allowances, cutting down travels completely, stamping out all those luxury expenditures, so that this small money we have can go for the right things. Can we see more money? We saw 560 billion for vaccines. Is that enough so that every one of us, including the young ones, are vaccinated?
Get vaccinated.
Can we see, because I didn't see much more money going, for example, to ICUs. Do we need to see people dying, or we can increase the number of ICUs in our hospitals so that these people who get challenged
to be able to manage
COVID, they can be able to manage it. So it is important that the heads should roll right now.
Talk to me about the internet now. The internet taxes, the OTT now. You know, these are some of those that when we talk about increasing or growing the tax base, is we look at so many people, how many people are with the gadgets on internet doing this and that. Let's talk about that, because we trade
it is still the same
OTT
situation
and bundled.
It is still the same situation we're talking about, because ideally, having put us in a lockdown, the only hope is now transacting online. Meetings are online, you are working online, you are working from home. But if the internet starts biting on 1st July, and the tax has now been heaped on the internet, it means even working from home becomes very challenging. So I think these are some of the things which can easily be revised, that we thought people will not be challenged by working from home and all of these. Can we find a way of looking at some of these issues amicably, so that either they can readjust, so that we enable people to work from home and be productive, so that we can still see the economy moving. But if the taxes remain exorbitant on these essential things like internet, and people are unable to work, then where is the government going to get taxes? So,
Keith, come in here.
We have a 12%, I think I stand to be corrected, but it should be 12% tax now that is going to be levied on data, effective 1st of July, this coming month.
14 days from now.
14 days from now.
Ticking. The clock is
In terms of strategy, it's a better strategy than OTT, because OTT has been bypassed by VPN and what have you. In terms of the likely impact it's going to have on businesses, that is yet to be determined. We can't say for sure, because we need to observe how businesses react. But there are some expected negative impacts on this, because essentially it's going to make data a little more expensive. What we can do as government is to subsidize some of the costs coming out of this, that we can subsidize some of the costs these telecommunication companies go through to provide internet. There was a time when we were talking about laying of an optical fiber cable. I don't know where that discussion stopped. Because if we have things like that in place, internet is supposed to be one of the cheapest things.
Isn't that what they call the NBI at the Ministry of ICT?
Yes, it's supposed to be one of the cheapest things in the world. When you have a chance to travel in other countries, you will notice that internet is much cheaper than even expected. In some places, cities have open Wi-Fi. I think Nairobi has even attempted to do that. I don't know how successful it has been. But that is something we can achieve, to make internet cheaper in spite of the tax. The challenge we have now is that we've put the tax and some of these that supportive strategies have not been put in place. So it's important to have those in place so that internet is cheap, because where we are headed, not even where we are headed, where we are right in the middle of the digital era. Everything is moving digital, and we can't afford to be left behind within the region and globally. So the other alternative that I have seen, an example, I think Australia has been the first country that has come to an agreement with these now powerful social media giants to be able to tax them and get revenue from them. So can we think of such arrangements where, because right now the tax is not targeting the social media companies, it is targeting the user. And the social media companies are benefiting. They are not paying, they are relatively going scot-free. So if we can come to agreements with these social media giants so that they also contribute to the tax revenue in this country, it would be perhaps even bigger, because they have much more volumes of revenue than we can collect from taxing data. Yeah.
Finally, finally, because our time has run out, in just 1 minute, 38 million shillings for every parish in the parish development model. Is that a good way to go? Or we think we're still far away from that? And Magara also just respond to that. And it's just a very simple one. Is it a good way to go? Or
first of all, I hope it is not going to be business as usual, because we realize that we have been having a sub-county as the last administrative unit. But its efficiency has been wanting. You find a sub-county which is largely available, the chiefs are not there, you go there, there is literally no work, and actually they have been under-facilitated, and there is not much activity we can think about that has been going around.
So getting to the parishes?
So moving away from the inefficient sub-county to the parish, it's where I'm seeking some extra intervention that we don't need to think that it is going to be a magic bullet. We need to put more thought to it, and the work should be more than what we have been doing. And that tells me that even the money that is allocated really is peanut. This money, if it is not well monitored, will be shared among the few chiefs and
the committee.
Yes, and we shall see them in jail, and nothing will happen at the grassroots. So we need that money should have increased a little. I know the hardships we are in. If we are to really have it meaningfully, and then we put more emphasis and more monitoring to make sure that we are able to achieve what we are supposed to achieve with the parish.
Keith, finally from you on the parish development model.
The model is good. It is not reinventing the wheel. I've been saying that the best illustration of this is the village health teams. That's an example of a parish development model in
the VHTs that we've had.
Yes, that's an illustration of how a parish development model works. They are an arm of government down to the smallest unit of government. 38 million, I think, is us cutting our quote according to the cloth, because initially it was 400 billion, and Parliament cut it to about 250, 260 billion. And the idea at the time was that we put in place the necessary infrastructure for this to take off, and appoint people where they are not, and things like that. So I've been saying this, and this will be my last statement on this. If well implemented, it is a good chance to get people out of poverty. And what do I mean by if well implemented? It is essential that we don't implement it outside the decentralization structures that exist.
Well, I want to thank you so much, gentlemen. Ndugu Emmanuel, Keith Chisame, a research fellow at the Coalition, Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment. Thank you so much for your thoughts on GMU Extra this morning. And thank you so much, Ndugu Magara Siraje. He's an Extractive Industries Coordinator at Oxfam. Thank you so much for being allowed to be with us here today. We want to thank you so much for God and My Country. We'll talk again tomorrow. God bless you. Stay blessed and stay well. Keep safe, and let's together fight COVID responsibly. Blessings and good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. Pick of the day on UBC, brought to you by Chulantende ku program obulamu was brought to you by.
We've cut and reduced our MTN Momo withdrawal rates. Now you can withdraw mobile money at the lowest rates. You also get MTN Central Points when you deposit, send, and withdraw MTN mobile money. Visit our Momo agents countrywide and withdraw mobile money at our reduced rates from 1st May 2021. Everywhere you go, MTN.
This is Auntie Jovita, your friend, your mentor, and your mother. Someone who wishes you so well. I am here to talk